Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Extra Mile with Whitewater Freight. Today we're going to talk about Stanley Milgram and other things. So what if I told you that most of the people you know would follow orders to do something that they knew were wrong, just because an authority figure told them to do so? It sounds crazy, right? But in the 1960s, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram proved that this happens far more often than you'd think. And here's the scary part. When people become disconnected from each other, when they stop seeing each other as people and start seeing each other as numbers, jobs, or other problems to deal with, they make some of the worst decisions possible. This is true in life, it's true in business, it's true in logistics, and today we're going to talk about why relationships keep us from making the kind of mistakes that happen when we forget the human side of what we do. Let's talk about Stanley Milgram, the experiment, and what happened. Milgram's experiment, he wanted to understand how far people would go in obeying orders, even when it went against their morals. He set up an experiment where participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person who was actually an actor who was pretending to be in pain. As the shocks got stronger, the person in the other room would scream, they would beg for the person to stop, or they would even go silent. Yet most participants kept going, just because the authority figure in the lab coat told them to do so. The shocking result of this is that over 60% of the people went all the way to the very highest voltage, even though they were visibly uncomfortable. They ignored their own instincts because they trusted the authority more than their personal judgment. So the real problem, distance makes it easier to dehumanize people. So why would normal people, everyday folks like you and me, do something so cruel? Because the further removed we are from one another, the easier it is to ignore the humanity. Milgram's participants weren't bad people. They weren't bad people at all. But they were separated from the consequences of their actions, and they couldn't see the person suffering. It was just a voice in the other room. Just another order to follow, just another number on the page. This is why history is full of examples of people doing horrendous things when they stop seeing individuals and start seeing people as others, a statistic, an obstacle, an inconvenience, a nameless problem to be dealt with, or insert whatever you want to insert in that blank. So let's talk about how this happens in business and logistics. You might be thinking, okay, what's this have to do with business? This seems a little esoteric and maybe flirting with, a weird part of humanity right now. Well, this is the exact same thing that happens in logistics, customer service, and everyday decisions based all over the place. How about when companies treat carriers like numbers? Ever see a company switch to a carrier to save $50 on a load? On paper, sure, makes sense. But in reality, it ignores the relationship. Who's been reliable? Who's helped with things when things went sideways? And who's been loyal? When you see a carrier as carrier number 46792 instead of Mike, who's been running loads for us for years, you make bad decisions. And I can tell you our industry is chock full of people that will have a load booked with a carrier and then pull it from that carrier for another $50 or $100 someplace else, ignoring the basic ethical thing of once you've given your word on something, you keep your word. Well, let's talk about when shippers see brokers as middlemen. A shipper looking at freight as just a cost will always chase the lowest price. But if they've built a relationship with a broker who understands their business, they get value beyond just a number, way beyond just a number. A true partnership isn't about the lowest number. It's about trust, reliability, and knowing who's actually in your corner when things go wrong. And probably, here's my biggest pet peeve. When employees become just job titles. Ever work somewhere that treats people like numbers instead of individuals? The kind of place where people are referred to as human capital instead of actual humans. That's what happens when business numbers over relationships. And it's why turnover is so high in companies that don't value their people. Relationships keep us grounded and human. So how do we make sure we don't fall into this trap? How do we keep business human? We build relationships. When you know someone personally, you think twice before making a decision that negatively affects them. It's real easy to fire off an email and tell somebody they're fired. Well, actually, I wouldn't know that because I've never done that. But it's a lot harder to look somebody in the eye and give somebody bad news than it is to do it over email, or to not even consider them somebody, just as a object or a department that you're doing something to. We stay connected to the people we serve. Whether it's clients, carriers, or coworkers, we remind ourselves that every decision impacts real people, not just spreadsheets. We take responsibility instead of blindly following the system. Instead of saying, that's just how it works, we ask, is this the right thing to do? The Whitewater Freight approach, people first, business second. I like to think of our company as a relationship company and transaction industry. Whitewater Freight, we don't believe in treating people like numbers. Our clients, our carriers, our team, they're real people, and that's how we do business. For clients, we don't just book loads. We understand your business and make sure you get real value, not just a number on a rate sheet. For carriers, we don't see you as just a truck or your driver is just a driver. We see you as a partner, and that's why our carriers trust us to keep them running with good freight and fair treatment. One of the things that our team does is make sure that we're paying out over average on lanes. It's the very first thing we look at. For our team, we don't just hire employees. We build a team. That's why we work well together, problem solve faster, and take pride in what we do. And our people know that we will take care of them. So what's the big lesson from Milgram's experiment? It's simple. When we become disconnected, we make bad decisions. In business, in life, logistics, everywhere. The further removed you are from the people your decisions affect, the easier it is to make choices that harm them. But when you stay connected, when you build real relationships, you make better decisions, not just for business, but for the people that keep it running. So next time you're faced with a tough call, ask yourself, am I just looking at the numbers, or am I thinking about the people behind them? This question can change everything. Have you ever seen where a decision went wrong and ignored relationships and the outcome that happened from it? Drop a comment. We'd love to hear about it. And until then, keep growing. We'll see you next time on The Extra Mile.